Welcome back, everyone, to the Cold War Continuum. We'll be moving into part 3, but I'd like to say thank you to Professor Helmut Müller-Endbergs and to Dr. Bodo Morzek, and also to the chair, Martin Kowalski, for the previous session, which formed the session part, Unsound Methods, Eavesdropping and Sonic Inversions in the Escalating of Cold War Terror. We're about to move into part 3 now, which, to quote the late great Bob Marley, is entitled War in the East, War in the West, the sono-political diasporization of Jamaican sound systems and their co-option during the Cold War. And it's absolutely my pleasure to welcome Sebastien Carayol, who maybe I should introduce with just a little biography. Is that okay with you, Sebastien?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be part of this symposium. It's an honor.
Wonderful. The honor is all ours. Absolutely. I'm just going to read a quick bio to give you a bit of context for our conversation. Sebastien Carayol is a curator and the curator of Jamaica exhibition, originally created for La Harmonie de Paris and currently on view at the National Gallery of Jamaica, Kingston. Sebastien Carayol is a documentary director journalist who fell in love with Jamaican music rather, in the mid-1990s, while discovering and following a number of London-based Jamaican heritage sound systems, before travelling to Jamaica several times in search of the roots of this culture. As a curator, Carayol has put together exhibitions in Paris, entitled Say What? Le Culte du Sound System. Please excuse me if I'm murdering your language. La Gaillet, La Rique, in 2013, and Los Angeles Hometown Hi-Fi Sonos Studio, Argent Provocateurs, Subliminal Projects. As a journalist and documentary director, he has written about reggae music for numerous music outlets, including Wax Poetics, Natty Dread, United Reggae, Rhythm, Vibrations, RBMAs Daily, and directed several TV pieces and documentaries pertaining to the culture, notably multi-awarded series Sound System for Arte Creative in 2017. So, welcome, Sebastien. We'll be engaging in a discussion, so hopefully a little less formal. And you entitled our discussion. You gave it the title of?
Sorry, I have trouble hearing some of the sound. But
okay.
Yeah, so basically, the discussion is about sort of the way sound system culture plays a really political and economical role in Jamaican society. Unlike the way sound system culture is viewed in Europe is simply entertainment. You go to a club and you go listen to music, but in Jamaica it's part of both the daily life and the political life and the economic life.
The absolute entanglement. Brilliant. So we'll get to the meaning, which I loved the actual title that you came up with for this session. Okay, so maybe I can start with a formal question. And it is, in 2017, as we've heard, you staged the major exhibition Jamaica at the Philharmonie de Paris in collaboration with the Jamaica Music Museum and the National Gallery of Jamaica, which in 2020 travelled onto or back to Jamaica. Could we start then by having you outline the scope and intention of the exhibition, the nature of the thematic concerns that it spoke to, the range of the exhibits and artifacts on display, and the reasons for telling this story first in an internationally renowned and significant European arts music institution?
Well, to me, it goes a very long way. It's from my first, when I started discovering Jamaican music, I started collecting records and getting interested in the history sort of beyond Bob Marley. I started to realize that there's definitely this question of, there's a half that's never been told in the history of Jamaican music, especially when you see it from Europe, which is, Bob Marley made Jamaican music and that's it. But when you discover it, you start to discover this very complex, very multi-layered music that's entangled in politics, religion. It's a mix of like secular, mystical, it's like all these sort of very, very complex layers that go into the music, and that made me really intrigued. And when I got the opportunity to talk about it, at first I started writing for a specialized magazine, in music. And then soon I realized that what we're doing, working for, let's say, Reggae magazine or urban music magazines, like you talk to people who already know this story. And one day I decided I want my aunt or my mom or somebody who doesn't know anything about Jamaican music to know a bit of this half that's never been told. Yeah. And the best way to do that is an exhibition, I think, in a major museum. And on the second part of your question, when Jamaica came about, the idea, I wanted the half that's never been told to be told by Jamaicans themselves. So from the get-go, when I was approached by the Philharmonie in Paris, I'm like, look, if we're doing an exhibition, I don't want it to be the same old sort of narrative of like European guy looking into a culture from outside. From the beginning, I'm like, I want Jamaicans to be involved at every level, and we curate this exhibition together. It's not me, it's me and Jamaicans, people who made this music, because I want to listen to their story, like, because who am I? Any specialist is not, wasn't born in Jamaica, isn't really a specialist, because you never had a first-hand account of the music and the culture.
Yeah, and the politics, as you say, that it emerges out of. I mean, I think that's really quite telling, this this initial impetus to not sort of reimpose, a tradition, or rather everything that had been struggled against, rather to then come back in and perhaps try to impose a kind of Western or first world order onto how these music should be seen or the spaces in which they should be heard. So yeah, I'm wondering about how did the collaboration itself emerge between the Jamaican Museum and yourselves?
Well, the first, so basically there's a very, at the time was little known Jamaica Music Museum. That's the director of which is Herbie Miller.
Yes.
Who used to be a Peter Tosh manager, and also an extraordinary place in Jamaica called the National Gallery of Jamaica, which has art from Jamaica. Like, as deep as I was into this culture, I didn't know many of the Jamaican artists, painters, sculptors, coming from saying the very same thing that the music says. And I was blown away. And right away, my thinking was, we need to help each other. I'll help in my way, sort of setting this exhibition in Paris first, because that's the thing too. In the Jamaica, there was this culture of like musical artifacts are not really made for museums or meant for museum or they're not precious enough as a painting or sculpture. And I believe they are, because it's really the heritage of Jamaica is music, one of the big heritage and assets. And the idea was to give these assets, and especially from sound system culture, sort of exposure. And to expose them well, it's like basically it's always better to come back to Jamaica having had this exhibition made in Paris first, because I had something to show, to convince people, because people in Jamaica, especially in the music business, they've been so burned sometimes by either Western producers or even their own government. Sometimes they don't trust. So if an exhibition, a big exhibition that started from a Jamaican government, maybe they wouldn't have trusted it as much, as strange as it may sound. So that's why Paris was just a stepping stone to really, my real goal was to make it happen in Jamaica with like me taking a backseat and Jamaican curators.
Yeah. And did its form change in any way? Because I attended very luckily on the opening night, which was obviously where I first met you. And I'm just wondering, did the form have to be sort of reduced for the Jamaican exhibition, or is it exactly the same?
Well, no, it had to be reduced out of budget constraints, because the Jamaican government doesn't have as much budget to put into exhibition. I would say compared to Paris, we had to work with about a fifth of what we had in Paris. Hence, the sort of, it had to be redone in a way that I liked, because when a means meet an end, I don't know the proverb, but basically I had to we didn't have budget to ship everything from Europe, from
Yes.
the US.
Yes.
But in a way, it's a blessing because now we have to really go and dig deep into what's left in Jamaica.
Fantastic.
So the narrative, the backbone is the same, but the things we show are different, but it's for the good because now it's showing Jamaica, look how much stuff you have left of your musical heritage.
Yeah, I recognize that I'd actually interrupted you because you were actually going to tell me about the range of the artifacts and exhibits that that were on display rather at the Philharmonie de Paris. So if you could do that, because I think it was such a massive breadth that it would be really great for people who hadn't had the opportunity to go to know about this.
Well, my idea in the exhibition is it's an exhibition about music, but Jamaican music is so much more than music. And also, especially in Paris, and then it proved to be important in the other places too, because he was in Sao Paulo in Brazil as well in 2018, music is sort of a gateway to gather people from different cultural practices. So that's why I wanted musical artifacts, of course, but also contemporary arts, classical arts, visual arts, movies, art films, because it's a way. So everybody coming, whatever they're into, they'll find something they don't know or they're interested in. If you like just paintings and classical art forms, you're going to find some of that too in this exhibition about music. And I like this dialogue that it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't know that music was broaching into sculpture and contemporary arts, and especially true. You might have heard of Nik Nowak, very brilliant German artist.
Just a little bit.
That's why his work was very, very, very interesting to me. It was sort of, I built the last room in the exhibition about dancehall culture and sound system around his piece, the Panzer, because to me it's exactly like I'm going to have people interested in seeing his work who are going to find something interesting about music it comes from, and vice versa.
I mean, I think what was interesting as well is that, so I think Nik was maybe the only European artist to show his sound system there. And you had this kind of extension of the dialogue between, the original, I suppose the original in air quotes, form or the site or source of sound system culture. And then as it diasporizes, and there's a German young guy who is then influenced this, and it's the way in which you have this kind of resonance of the form itself, as well as the influence and the sound and the image of it being reflected back. So you have this kind of rhizomatic or rhizomorphic process that's happening, where it's constantly adapting and mutating, which I thought was really quite interesting. Again, about the exhibition, yes.
Yeah, that's what to me is fascinating about how basically the half that never been told of Jamaican music to me, to the mainstream, is this birth of a form of sound system culture that's being practiced, sort of looted by like urban music and hip hop today, and everybody takes a piece of it, but nobody gives it back its credit.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting how it's a culture that by being diasporic mutated into something different and into its own form of culture wherever it landed.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to remind our audience that if they have questions for Sebastien during the course of our discussion, that they can put them in the chat on whatever platform they're on, and moderator Elisa Brown will take them and pass them on to us. Okay, sorry about that, Sebastien. Okay, so yes, just to move on, obviously very much probably still relatedly. And you may have answered this already actually in some ways, but I was just thinking about, whilst the music itself of reggae in its global spread and influence has become perhaps Jamaica's greatest export, it's seen as an art form. I wonder if we can think about why this has not readily been the case with its hardware, the sound systems, the physical structure of the sound systems from which this music is emitted. So does a certain conceptual or perceptual transformation take place when these black sonic artifacts, the sound systems, which, as you say, they tell another story, one of the history of the interweaving of Jamaican technological innovations and adaptations within a history of colonial resistance and self-making, when they're taken out of their usual context and they either seep into or are placed in the art museum or the art world, does that enable them to be seen as art? And again, and this might have been a point that you had previously answered, are they then viewed, are they viewed or held by their creators in the national consciousness of Jamaica? Are they viewed there as art?
Well, that was one of the challenges and the big sort of achievements that I wanted with the exhibition is by taking old vintage sound system boxes into a museum, you make them exist on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important because in terms of now it creates a pride in having these artifacts in Jamaica. Well, back then, I'll take a very easy example. One of the sound system speakers we showed from Jamaica from the 60s in the exhibition was King Tubby's Sound Systems original bass speaker, which was found by a collector in the UK. And after many adventures, he managed to have it in the UK and loan it to us for the exhibition. But when it was found, that box was used as a bench in a backyard in Jamaica.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's like, it sounds crazy to us, but in Jamaica, people need more of a bench than a whole piece of sound system, you know?
I mean,
so,
but I saw that episode within your award-winning series. And yes, it almost felt like sacrilege. But then I wonder is that not necessarily a fetish?
Well, it sounds, to me, it sounds as a sacrilege to people who have the economical means to see it as something else than a bench.
That's exactly what
if you have nothing, you need a bench for your house, and that's what it's going to be. So the idea was to sort of be like, look, it might be a great bench, but it's also a really important part of Jamaica's history. And what's interesting too, in why I really grew really fascinated with sound system culture is that it's a culture that's musical. Mm-hmm. It's also very visual because the way the boxes are made, there's a craft involved, which is woodcraft, sonic craft. So it's sort of a full experience in craftsmanship. And Herbie Miller, the co-curator in Jamaica of the exhibition, came up with a great title for this section about sound systems. He called it Seeing Sounds, Hearing Images.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what sound systems do, you know?
Of the senses, this transformation of the senses, which I suppose is sort of resonant and actually interwoven with what the music itself makes you feel. You start to feel with your skin, or you feel with your eyes.
It's just
from the bass. Yeah, it's absolutely multi-sensory. Yes, yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Okay, yeah, okay. So maybe at that point, then, that might be a good point to see one of the episodes of your 10-part series that Sebastian's very kindly allowed us to watch here. Yeah. We're going to go for episode 1, Sound System, Sound Pioneers, just to give a kind of context for maybe we can dissect it after. Yes, thank you. Do we have it? Thanks for being patient, everyone. It's just about to start.
Yes, I know you walk and talk, respect Joe and thing. Dedicated to the original gate man. Lord, man, me went to a dance at Clarendon. Me and a big fat thing named Panzer. But as me reach at the dance gate, the gate man a hold up on me.
Jamaican people will tell you that they feel it. They're not telling you they hear it. They want to feel it. So when you're in a sound system dance or a blues dance or a dance hall, you must feel the bass licking in your chest.
Stibbling dong dong, stibbling dong dong. It's a rude white town, it's Kingston town. Stibbling dong dong, stibbling dong dong. It's a rude white town, it's Kingston town.
I would say sound systems started to appear in Jamaica in the 1950s. sound system was like what you'd call in today's language a disco, but on wheels. It was at a point when big band music was on the downturn. So many people wanted to still have a good time, especially the poorer people who could not afford the dances at the posh clubs and hotels. It was the voice of the people.
God let the world know how much I need you so. Still I want the world to know. Gee, we are never let you go, you know. Go to be good, be good.
Stone Love, #1 to the world.
People who would build sound systems that we now know, the most well-known is Mr. Headley Jones, who is still around at 98 years old, and he's quite an inventor.
Okay, let's go. There was a gentleman in Jamaica by the name of Tom the Great Sebastien. He approached me for building one of my amplifiers for him, which I did. He promptly called it a sound system. That's where the name derives. He called it a sound system.
In the dance hall, DJs rap to the sound of reggae music played over amplified sound systems. Couples dance together in sensual dance called the rubber dub.
I'm going to go roll and me say get Jamaica. Don't you know singing Remagan man, he was a governor. You so sailed up on the ship when him the Jolly Raja.
We didn't break it down to no DJ, it was just disc jockey. They'd introduce the songs, usually in rhyme, and they put the record on as they're introducing it with such impeccable timing and poetry.
You
call them toasters because they're toasting you. It's like toasting the crowd.
Make start, move forward.
My name is Monty Blake, and I am one of the Meritone brothers, Meritone being the oldest continuously operating sound system in Jamaica. I was about 8 years when that was taken. This box was part of our Meritone box, and this is the big 18-inch speaker, and here is Fats Domino from New Orleans, and we name every box of, rhythm and blues artists. Why this box is called Fats Domino? Because it was so big, and Fats was a big guy, and it used to give us a lot of problems in the morning after the dance is finished to load it onto the truck when everybody's a little drunk and all that. So.
In addition, we could say that as a result of Jamaican dance halls, we now have hip hop. You will also see a big influence on dubstep, techno, that has come out internationally that weren't necessarily a part of the Jamaican culture, but as a result of it.
Orgasm.
You still hear me okay?
The Orgasm nightclub. I think that's so.
Thank you, Nick. That's great. Thank you. And Sebastien, you're there, yes?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Wonderful. So, yeah, I just wonder if we can maybe tease out some of the connecting points within that. I mean, it ends with you, or with the speakers pointing to the globalized, the diasporization of the sound systems in every contemporary music form, essentially, whether mainstream or underground. They mentioned something like dubstep, which is quite a particular genre, small scene in the UK. So, this colonized music, or the music of the colonized, or the formerly colonized, as it spreads and mutates, is one of the key things that I think that it gets picked up really well in a very short amount of time. Each of these short documentaries are like 5 minutes, yet they condense down, I think, extremely well the kind of the significance and the spread at the same time, the breadth of the music at the same time. But I was maybe just going to ask you maybe to come back first and say, why is it that the sound system becomes the voice of the people?
Well, I think what it is that, and that's what makes it also fascinating, is voice of the people. Any country that has a sound system culture per se, a native sound system culture, it's something. It creates something when there's nothing, in the sense that there are places for music. There were places for music in Jamaica or Trinidad in the 50s, 60s, but they weren't for working class people. They were for affluent people, and working class people couldn't afford to go there, but they still wanted to listen to music. So to me, it's an invention. Anywhere it started, it's an invention of. It's a proof of working class ingenuity. It's like, you don't let us in. No, it doesn't matter. We'll do it ourselves. Like, we'll create. That's what Herbie was saying. We'll create the means to listen to music, regardless if we're admitted in that club or not, and we'll create our own thing. So I think that's really, to me, why it became the voice of the people. Especially in Jamaican sound system, was also media. It's a place where you comment the news, the local news, the international news. Catastrophe happens, the DJ on the mic is going to make a little line about it. And so sometimes the sound systems are called, a nickname was in Jamaica was the ghetto Gleaner. And Gleaner is the newspaper in Jamaica.
Newspaper. Yes, yeah.
And so I think that's why when I was saying it's a multi-layered culture within a multi-layered culture, sound system culture in Jamaica did all this. And what's very interesting, you mentioned also the diasporic aspect. Wherever it lands, sometimes it creates a romanticized vision of the country we left.
Yes.
Take for example, in the UK, Jashaka, leading big dub sound system.
I remember Jashaka very well, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And indeed, the way he plays the same way people used to play in the 60s in Jamaica. He plays just one turntable, really vintage amplifiers, all records, dub plates. And it's funny because you go to Jamaica, you show a Jashaka video in Jamaica, people are like, this guy is mad. Like, why does he
Why is
play
he still
MP3s
playing this?
like
Yeah.
everybody else,
Yeah.
And so he takes a chunk of the country he left to sort of create this ideal bubble of what the Jamaica, and it links also in the sound system series I did an episode in Trinidad and Tobago with the Micman.
Yeah.
And they come from India. And they create this mini bubble of India in Trinidad where they do sound clash, but they play against each other, just Bollywood music from the 50s. And one of the guys, the interviewees, he said, we know that it's not the India today, but it's the India I would like India to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think
he's never been in India. He's a second generation Indian,
exactly,
and like, I'm creating my own India away from home through sound system culture, and that's fascinating.
And it's again, the recourse to the because I think it becomes like all good sound clashes, it becomes about the superiority of who's got the latest, like the selector, who's got the latest records, or or the hardest beats or bass, or who can play the loudest. And I think what's quite interesting about the Micman is that diasporization, but the other way, the India diaspora, who came to the island with the abolition of slavery, and then the insertion into this other sound system culture that starts to spread but then mutates. So it has some resonances of sound system culture in India, in Calcutta, but at the same time, it's a very Caribbean form. And as you say, this kind of quite romanticized. I mean, they're playing Asha Bosley singles and collecting these Bollywood singles from the 50s and 60s, the kind of the height of that cinema. So I think this transmutation of all, and that obviously connects a wider kind of colonized body of people historically, both in this case the British colonialists, but I think that circulation, the triangular trades circulation, and then that retort and the memory of home, a memory of a home that was never had, that was never lived, is always quite interesting in terms of the forms that these cultures, these practices find sonically, I think. Yeah. Sorry, it might have taken me a bit of a long time to get there, but no, I was very much agreeing with your point there on the Micman. Who, I just found that example quite interesting. But I mean, you also look at New York, and particularly Kool Herc, and coming from Jamaica. I mean, if you want to take that story up, because it's your story in terms of your filmmaking, yes.
Yeah, well, the Kool Herc case, it's I think a lot of people have been sort of taking the a bit idealizing the whole thing, is that it's Jamaican, and so basically all the hip hop was born in Jamaica because American MCs imitated Jamaicans, and I think that's a bit far-fetched to say that, because there was already a culture of like spoken word, like pre-rap in the US. Yeah. And these guys, I talked to Coke La Rock once. He's like, I didn't know who U-Roy was. I was listening. My model was Richard Pryor,
really?
Like a comedian,
yes.
because of his delivery, and you hear it in Coke La Rock's delivery. So that's an interesting one. But another one that's interesting to me is in Belém, in Brazil, the whole techno brega scene.
Yes, that gets really...
It's taking Amazonian culture and like this very old form of, let's say, it's a loose version of tango in Belém called brega, and it mixes it with like techno beats, and now it's techno brega played on these crazy machines that look like animals from the Amazon.
Yes, yeah.
And I love that it's like cross-pollinating into all these sort of working class cultures, mixing into one, and it gives a form of sound system culture that's its own.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing series that, I'm sure we're going to watch another piece from shortly. But, the other part of that first excerpt from the series was thinking about the role in the figure, and how, on the one hand, mythical and seminal he is to the emergence and development of Jamaican sound system culture, or the Jamaican sound systems themselves, the physical entity, is the figure of Headley Jones. And so I just wonder, if you could maybe say something to Headley Jones. I mean, I've long been fascinated with him. It's this, as I say, relatively unknown figure, but then he spends part of his time in the UK during the war. So they've got this Cold War continuum of his engagement and training in the in the UK, in the British Royal Air Force. So I just wondered if you could say something about how he takes that experience, that training, and brings it to the return home. So he goes to the colonial mother, he returns home to Jamaica, the colonial child, as it were, and transforms this technology that gives us the birth of, sound system culture.
Yeah. Well, so basically his story is fascinating. He's a guy. So when I interviewed him, he was almost 99 years old. I was 98, and he passed maybe 6 months after the series aired. So it's really his last interview. So some of his memories were a bit off track, but like he still was very much there, and his story is fascinating because he was this sort of inventor. He did Kingston's first traffic lights, and then he invented telescopes, and then he did he copied the Spanish guitar to make up the first electric guitar in Jamaica.
Is that the one that you showed at the Philharmonie? Was it the first?
Yeah. In 1940.
Yeah.
Then, of course, since it's there's a little bit of pride. So a lot of people have started to say, oh, it's the first ever electric guitar that was copied by Les Paul. I think it's far from being the truth, but I like the sort of romanticized story.
The mythos, yes, yeah.
Anyway,
yes.
so Headley Jones in 1943 joined the RAF. He was working on radars, and he became fascinated with waveforms. And then he realized that waveforms have this propensity to be heard if you have the right equipment to make them listenable. And that's the technology that was then used on radios. So he brought this technology, this knowledge he acquired from radar, to build his first amplifiers for sound systems. And the funny thing is, when he returned to Jamaica in 1946, he started a radio service shop, also a record shop, because he was a big jazz guy and jazz musician. And he built his first amplifier in 1947. But initially, his amplifier was just to advertise the record he was selling outside of his shop. But one day, one of the future first legend of sound system culture in Jamaica, Tom the Great Sebastien, was playing records across the street, in a park across the street from his shop. And he was getting mad because Headley Jones' sound system sounded a lot better than his.
Yeah.
So he wants him, he's like, can you build me the same amp that you have?
Absolutely,
That's what I want to play with.
Yeah.
And that's how sort of Tom the Great Sebastien got his start as like one of the very first sort of professional sound systems in Jamaica. It's from Headley Jones playing a Perez Prado record. It's nothing nothing very clashy, but like he played it so
being able
loud
to refine this,
he flopped Tom the Great Sebastian's dance, and so the guy was no, now I want your amp for my set.
I mean, I think this thing you say as well of the kind of raids on space of the sound clash that you talk about. He just has his shop and he's playing his records in his shop, but he's blowing out the competition. Maybe it wasn't even seen as competition. It was just the guy who'd set up on the... Yes.
When competition didn't even exist. So from the very first day, it started as a competition.
Yeah, and hence we have the sound clash, right? I mean, that maybe that's also something to think about, this kind of the kind of guerrilla nature of a lot of sound system culture, the way in which it would just take over in any space, whatever. It could be a parking lot or, just wherever one could set up your system and play. So you have these sort of temporary autonomous zones, that are then taken down and then move on either somewhere or, this moment, I suppose, of communality that you get from them. And particularly as you were saying, you were talking about the way in which it is a working class culture. So yes, it's an integrated system of labouring people making these beautiful boxes that maybe, as you say, aren't initially perceived as art, even though, I mean, we saw with the Tubby one or the Meritones one, how artfully adorned it is. But yes, maybe, I mean, that was maybe my point at the beginning, this idea that maybe the conception of these pieces of what we may conceive as art is often seen pejoratively as just folk art or part of a vernacular culture. But yeah, sorry. No, it's just absolutely absolutely
and
fascinating.
sometimes it's not considered as art at all.
Yeah. And sorry, I was going to say, I wonder, is that because of the class dimension? It's a very, economically disadvantaged island,
I think definitely because Headley Jones also told me, like, he came from what he calls middle class, but which is sort of a privileged class. And Jamaica is very much about the class system is very important. And people from uptown would never consider anything from downtown as like valuable or worth it. And I believe the opposite. So, and it's always that's also the same narrative was always pushed, because it's the uptown people run the music industry, and then so you get just a certain side of the story. And it's like, wait, if this side of the story exists, is because that other side has made it possible. So
and also because it's often the case that the downtown, the other side, is where the innovation happens.
Exactly.
Okay, can I just ask for Elisa for a quick time check? Oh, wow. 10 minutes, no questions just yet. Okay, I just wondered if we might turn then to, if we could play, Lisa, if that's okay with you, Sebastien, maybe the second episode?
Sound systems, as I look at it today, was our internet, was our laptop, it was our newspaper, everything. It was everything to us.
Politicians in them office with the white paper. Yeah, who that send the plane in the skyscraper? Them kill the innocent, them never kill the troublemaker. And them just a preacher, just bad behavior.
We're citizens, we have a passport, we have a document which makes our claim to belong, but we don't have public spaces of our own. And the racism and the xenophobia and the white supremacy and the hatred make those spaces harder to acquire. So we create the space, we create the technology, we create the ritual.
Music shall live forever. Music is here to stay.
Many of us, refuse to do the work that our parents had done. And so the importance of self-making, not through work, but through play, through leisure, through culture, this is a very important generational marker. One of the great attractive things about the sound system was it was a technology that could be controlled by its users, its makers. We have so little beauty in our lives at that point that these beautiful objects become the focus. The Notting Hill Carnival derives its history from the history of carnival in the colonial spaces of the world. And what you have with the Notting Hill Carnival is the return of those traditions of carnival to the metropole, to the colonial centre. But I would date the appearance of the sound systems in the carnival to the early 1970s. And this is an interesting moment, culturally speaking, too, because this is the moment where the very first attempts to have Caribbean music on the radio, maybe only 2 hours a week on the local radio, but it meant a new infrastructure for spreading the sound to a younger generation.
400 blessés, dont 170 policiers, 53 arrestations. C'est le dernier bilan des accrochages qui se sont produits au cours du festival antillais de Notting Hill à Londres.
My memory of that riot is not of the great violence of the resistance against the police. It's of really running and this constant hail of bricks, of bottles, a storm of bricks and bottles coming over their heads and going down to where they were. And the sound system, the bassy sound of the sound system sort of echoing through the bricks.
I'm Spider-Man, the selector, operator, owner of the sound. And we played carnival for about 35 years. When I started, carnival was more for the people who lived in the area. It was more a black ethnic thing. It wasn't so cosmopolitan, For us, it was such a thing against the system, if you know what I mean. It was against what the Babylon system was throwing at us, and it was a way of us expressing ourselves with our music. Basically, Ladbroke Grove was a ghetto. This is where immigrants came when they first came to England. And now, you can't buy a house. You have to be a politician.
So all those spaces, which we made habitable spaces, have been taken away from us. And I think, the carnival has suffered as a result of that. And walking up from the road, looking at everyone fortifying everything, privatizing their own little bunker to prevent the encroachment of the carnival into their precious bit of London, makes me sick, actually. I'm repelled by it. There's a bigger question, isn't there? And that is how the people who love black culture and who have made it part of the mainstream do not always like the people who make that culture. So you can, in a consumerist mentality, you can separate the people from the culture. You can consume it independent of them.
Thank you, Nik. Could we have Sebastien back? Thank you. Sorry,
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now, Sebastien. Sorry about that. Of course, we're online. There will be some technical difficulties, but we should be. I'm sorry. Ah, okay. So we lost Sebastien. That's is there no way of we can get his call back? Okay, I'm sorry about this. I mean, maybe I can just sort of extemporize whilst we're... Yes, he's back? Oh, he's brilliant. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
That sounds like Sebastien.
Yeah.
I'm sorry we lost you momentarily.
Okay, sorry, but I'm not sure what happened, but anyway.
Yeah, we've got you back.
We need a Headley Jones to fix this.
I'm sure that wouldn't have happened at all with Headley Jones. Okay. I mean, I know we're very pushed for time, and I know at this point we've actually talked a little bit about the diasporization. After that clip, particularly where you had interviewed Professor Paul Gilroy, and his comments around space and the creation of space through this culture was something I wanted to come to, but actually I think we're quite pushed for time. So what I'd like to do is actually to come to your comments that you use in the title, Death in the Arena, the Jamaican Sound System as an Electoral Weapon.
Well, yeah, basically the way Jamaican political system was created, it's really these two parties, the JLP, which is more, let's say, liberal, capitalist. That's what I was saying in the 70s. And the PNP, more socialist. And it all started from a strike on the docks in 1938. And these parties have sort of the way, it's important to understand that the way they got created, each party wins different neighborhoods. And now, music being so important in Jamaica, that's why I took in the exhibition the example in the early 70s, Michael Manley for the PNP versus Edward Siaga from the JLP, because they both used music and musicians to win elections. Michael Manley did a series of concerts called the Bandwagon in 71, where he took Bob Marley, Clancy Eccles, who did songs in his favor. And on the other hand, Edward Siaga was the guy who opened the first studio in Kingston called West Indies Recording. So they both had a legitimacy in music, and they tried to use that for electoral purposes. And it's very important. And that's a tradition that still continues to this day. And since we don't have a lot of time, I'll jump straight to that.
Okay.
So basically, yeah. So basically, PNP, JLP try to have their own sound system and dancehall on their side. And you got so you had some sound system in the 70s. One called formerly King Attorney was turned into socialist roots, and they support the PNP.
Yes.
Socialist roots. I mean, that's showing that it was very involved. And let's say some other sounds will be considered JLP, like the legendary sound system Kilimanjaro from the 80s, 90s. It's considered JLP sound, but just because it's based in South Kingston in a JLP area. So that's sort of how its sound system are politicized because of where they belong. It's almost like a football club mentality. Just a last sort of recent example, in 2011, the parish of St. Anne was looking for a new candidate for their constituency. and they ran out of idea. Who did they go see? The owner of Bass Odyssey Sound System, Keith Walford.
Yeah.
And he ran for the PNP
because
he's the most influential character in the area, and he's a sound system owner. So that's very unique to Jamaica.
Yeah, I mean,
and then, a very last example in 2016 that's very interesting. There was this the Ministry of Finance talking about how the PNP did great and their achievements, and nobody really, the crowd was there because there was a free sound system dance that night. So everybody came, but they didn't care about the discourse. But then the DJ was mixing sort of popular tunes of the time, and he got the attention. So Peter Phillips, the Minister of Finance, is talking about the achievements, blah, blah, blah. Nobody really cared. And then the DJ played Alkalines, All About the Money, a song called All About. And then everybody went crazy and loved it and was really interested.
Yeah.
And then right after that, they wanted to say how bad the JLP had left the state of the economy. And he exited to a song called Don't You Remember by Adele. And that got a big success too. So they got their message across from dancehall and music.
Sebastien, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I mean, we had that little technical issue, and then I think I was so engrossed in some of the kind of the ways in which you were articulating the transition from to art from the sound system in the sound system history that maybe I took a little bit of time away from you. But it's been really fantastic to have you a part of the Cold War Continuum. I know that there was so much more that you wanted to say, but I would thank you for your time, and I hope everyone's given you a virtual clap. I am definitely from here too.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.